No intro, here we go. We're going to talk about when it's applicable to use machine training because a lot of times I'll hear people say in comments and message threads and throughout the entirety of weight training that machines are useless and you should only ever use free weights and that machines have no real world application because you don't have to stabilize the weight. And that's simply not true. Usually people will bring it up in the realm of sports and they'll say that there's no application in sports where you can get benefits from machines, and things like leg presses are never as good as squats, and like the Smith machine bench press is never as good as the regular bench press. And some of these things I'll agree with. The most common criticisms of machines are that they move in a fixed pathway. That if you're on the Smith machine, really you're just bending your arms and extending your arms. You have no three-plane movement. You can't move your arms up. You can't move your arms down. And typically when you're bench pressing, some people will bring the bar down here and it'll end up here. They'll move it in a J pattern or a J arc. Other people will tell you should literally just try to bring the bars down and then straight back up. Matt Wenning typically tells you get your position set and then you just bend your arms straight and your arms done. And that if you move it in a straight line, you're using less muscular effort than if you were moving it in an arc, which makes sense. And the argument for free weights is then it's a more natural movement and it can carry over to sports more. However, there's some aspects where that doesn't work. The first, not negative, but the first, say, uh, drawback to free weights is resistance is always down. The weight always wants to go down, never wants to go in another direction. So you're limited to activities where you're going in one direction against gravity, which is why if you were playing football and you're going to go tackle the guy who's going with the ball, there's no weighted activity with free weights that can copy that. You might say, oh, well, the bench press, because you're kind of pushing that person out. And yes, but you're not going to get as much leg drive doing bench presses as you are running full speed at someone trying to tackle them down. And you can't emulate that with free weights. There are machines that you can use both in your running speed, not always machines, but implements. Like there's the belted treadmill you can run with. You can use tackling dummies. You have different options like that. There's implements you can use that are not simply free weights, or you can use free weights to develop your strength and then apply that by still practicing your sport specific skills. But you can also develop that strength using machines. And none of this means you have to pick one or the other. I see no reason to do that. You can absolutely use both. When I bench press, I do free weight bench presses. I do incline dumbbell presses, but I also use the cable crossover machine. I also use the PECTEC machine. When I do shoulder presses, at present I'm using the hammer seated shoulder press. I just want to focus on grabbing those handles and pressing up and working my arms and shoulders that way. That's my current preference. I've used dumbbells before. I've used barbells before. I had no problem doing that. There's nothing wrong with it. Right now, it's toward the end of my workout. It's actually my last exercise when I've already done bench press, incline presses, pec decks, cable crossovers, not in that order. But with the cable crossover, I'm getting a lot more work through the internal rotators of the shoulder, which is fatiguing both the shoulder complex and also my chest muscles to the point that when I get to my last exercise, I've already been through 3 other exercises that involve both heavy pressing and contraction and use of the anterior deltoid and medial deltoid. So now I'm fatigued to the point that I don't mind having that weight stabilized for me. Is it the right option for everyone? No. Is it the right option for me? For now. And if I wanted to do a free weight exercise, I would probably just lower the weights to a more manageable level. But the argument that there's no validity and no use of machines ever is nonsense. They definitely have value. One of them being if you don't want to, I don't want to say if you don't want to lay down, but if you don't want to do the dumbbell fly, you can use the cable crossover. And the cable crossover has resistance through more of the range of motion because as you pull the cable, the weight is always bearing down, but the cable changes the direction of resistance. So now you can move the cable this way, and through this entire range of motion, the weight is still fighting to go back down. So you have resistance through the entire movement. Whereas if you were to do dumbbell flies, you'll have some resistance. It'll maybe peak, depends on, you'll probably have peak resistance here because your arms are actually at 90 degrees to the floor. They're perpendicular to the floor. And as you move up, the weight actually becomes less and less and less resistance-wise. Yes, the mass of the weight is the same, but the resistance from gravity is less and less because when you have the weight here, the weight is pulling straight down into the ground, but the resistance for your muscle needs to be going in more of an arc. The pectoral is a fan-shaped muscle. So you're going to have much more resistance for the pectoral as you can kind of make yourself contract your chest here and here and here. You may be contracted here, and that's a static contraction, but you can relax your pec and there's no resistance against the pectoral muscle. At this point, all of the stress is through the arm, just holding the dumbbells there. The same thing when you're doing a curling motion. At the bottom of the curl, there's minimal resistance because you're just moving. You can move a 5-pound dumbbell, a 50-pound dumbbell, or if you were to grab a 100-pound barbell, you're only moving it forward here. There's no resistance yet. As you start coming up, you start getting resistance. It peaks here when your arms are at 90 degrees because then the weight is bearing directly down where the resistance is highest. And as you start to bring it in, the resistance again becomes less and less because you're no longer fighting directly in the direction of gravity. You're bringing the bar in. So you're the machine, as you're doing a curl on like a hammer strength machine or even a cable curl, as you curl up, resistance is always going in direct opposition to the direction you're moving because the cable is always pulling against the pulley and it moves the weight, which is on the other side of the pulley, away from the direction you're moving. Now, some machines are obviously built better than others. Some machines you're going to get into, maybe you want to do curls and it just feels like crap, don't use them. But if you're just doing this for strength or you're doing this for bodybuilding purposes, you can absolutely use a variety of machines. I'm not saying they should replace your regular weight training free weights, but they can definitely be used and they will definitely provide results if you're putting in the same effort. The fact that you don't have to balance them, it's not necessarily a negative. For nervous system conditioning and learning the movement and being good at free weights, yes, you have to use free weights. Even if you do a lot of machine training, if you want to be a good bench presser or you want to compete in powerlifting, you still have to practice your sport, which is the free weight bench press, the squat, the deadlift. You still have to do those exercises, and you can't eliminate them completely for machines and expect to excel in those areas. However, if you look at groups like Westside, I think they say they only do regular deadlifts at meets. Other than that, they don't do the deadlifts in the fashion that they do them at meets. There's substituted exercises. There's other ways of performing the activity. So they only max out deadlifts when they're at meets. You can do other activities. An example for the change in direction of resistance from machines, I don't like to do crunches on the floor. I purchased this machine, which is an ab bench. I'll move this camera now. First time I've done this. I've had this for maybe a month now. And there's a convex pad, which makes me stretch out my abs before I crunch. Grab these handles. I crunch up. And the weight moves. So that provides resistance. In that case, you have to add resistance because doing it without the weights would simply mean no resistance, not even the resistance of gravity, because there's nothing there. So in 0 to 0 added resistance, crunch is more effective. My body weight is the resistance. From the seated machine, no resistance till you add the plates, but that's the whole point. But if you're someone who can't get down on the floor, that can be useful. I just prefer doing that and I enjoy it. And then I can also add weight over time versus just the resistance of gravity. But the point is, the weight is always being pulled down in the same direction that your upper body would be pulled down when doing crunches. But you're changing the direction of gravity by the pulley at the top of the machine through the cable. You can do that with cable curls, other machines. The most direct quad resistance is the leg extension. That's why you'll usually feel a burn once you get into a few reps of that. Is it the best exercise for quads? Probably not. Squat's typically always king, but if you can't squat, you may need to do substitute exercises. You may need to do leg presses. You may want to throw in some leg extensions. There's the argument of shearing forces on the knee. I'm not saying that argument isn't valid, but I am saying that the direct resistance applied to the shin is its resistance in the direct opposition of the movement. As you're straightening your leg, the resistance is against the shin bone. That's direct resistance to the movement of the muscle. When you're doing squats, barbell on your back is not direct resistance to the way your leg is usually going to move. It is direct resistance to you standing up normal, and you can use much more weight, which is what makes the squat such an effective exercise. It's not just that it trains your legs, it typically is considered a full body exercise. Is the direct resistance to the legs the same as in the leg extension? No, but the overall resistance and force production requirements from your muscles are so much higher. That's what creates much better results. I don't think anybody's ever built huge legs just from leg extensions who doesn't also do squats or some type of leg press movement or deadlift, something that also uses the rest of the body or makes a much greater amount of force production from the legs. Can you build big legs from leg extensions and leg presses and leg curls? Definitely. Do you have to squat? Not at all. Do you have to squat if you're a power lifter? 100%. If you're competing in all three lifts. The squat, do you have to squat if you are an athlete? Again, no. Should you? If you can, possibly. I'm not your coach. I can't tell you one way or the other. Will they make you a better athlete? They should. It's an activity where you will have better mobility, and if you have the flexibility and then the mobility to go along with it, the stronger you are throughout that range of motion, the better off you'll be in the long run and just in life in general for ambulatory purposes. But will it, if you don't like squatting, can you still build big muscles? Definitely. Can you still build strong legs? Absolutely. The leg extension is usually used as a test for leg strength in universities. Is it the best test? They would say yes, which is why they use it. Is it the most applicable to real world activities? I would say absolutely not, because it's incredibly rare that you're in a seated position and suddenly have to extend your lower leg. That it's definitely more useful to be able to get up out of the seat, which is a problem that older people have when they're not able to get out of their chairs, which is why they have a loss in quality of life because they're no longer ambulatory. But this is the difference between the clinical setting and the real world setting. I'm not telling you that you should never use machines, and I'm also not telling you that you should always use machines, but I am saying that they definitely have their applications. They are very useful. Your muscles don't have any idea what you're doing. Your muscles don't know that you're using free weights or that you're using machines, or if you're using resistance bands, or if you're just using your body weight, or if you're picking up garbage. Your muscles just know they have to exert force, and they don't know how much force they're exerting. The nervous system will call on more and more fibers based on how much resistance there is. I can say how heavy the weight is, but we're actually just going to say how much resistance there is to the movement they're trying to perform. And in certain cases, you want to be able to apply that resistance directly to the motion that you're performing. Ideally, for a curl, you'd even take the hand out of the movement. If you could apply the resistance directly to the forearm without having to involve the gripping muscles of the hand, that would be a more direct movement or more direct resistance to the movement of the biceps contracting to bring the forearm up. As we talked about with arm training the other day, you would also like to supinate the wrist, and you can vary that by maybe rolling some bands around your hand, making sure that band comes down only on this side, not on this side of the hand, just this side. So as you curl, you're also getting the resistance against the supinating movement. There aren't really machines that can do that, but there are, like I said yesterday, offset handles, which would make the resistance heavier on one side due to torque. That still would be a free weight activity, which would help you. But there's nothing wrong with free weights, but they do have their limitations. And anyone who says they're absolutely perfect is 100% wrong, which is why we have so many machines. And not every machine is great. Some of them are just cash grabs and unnecessary. This ab machine I have over here, it's not necessary, but it makes it easier for me, and I have the convenience of it being here. Come downstairs, there it is, hop on, do my ab work, done. Go to the gym, do my workout at the gym, get home before I go upstairs, there it is, get my ab work done, done. I can go back upstairs, watch TV, enjoy my life, spend time with my kids, what have you. But machines obviously have their uses. It's for someone to tell you that they are useless and they'll never be as good as free weights. Everything is a tool, and every tool is there to meet a goal. What do you want to do? What are you trying to achieve? Well, what is the best tool to help you reach your goals? And that's typically where it comes down to. If you're just looking to get bigger and stronger because you want to change the way you look, you can do that completely with machines. It's much more expensive, especially if you're trying to fashion a home gym where you can do everything at home. It's much cheaper to get a bench and some plates and over time build up maybe with a rack or something of that nature and not mess with too many machines. The plates are going to be a whole lot cheaper, and if you're getting plate-loaded machines, you got to buy the plates regardless. But the idea that they have no use is nonsense. There's certain muscles that are infinitely easier to train with machines. If you don't like doing stiff-legged deadlifts, you're going to want some kind of hamstring curl machine in order to perform hamstring curls. If you don't like doing chin-ups, or you don't have a chinning bar, or you want to build your lats and nothing's hitting them, a pullover machine might help. Is a pullover machine going to be cost-effective? Probably not. Probably better off using dumbbells, but that doesn't invalidate the use of the pullover machine if you use it correctly. Or you can get a cable system or use the cables, the pulleys at your gym to retrain, to redirect the resistance so that it matches the motion that you're trying to move in. If you want to do tricep work, you have push-ups, you have dips, you have bench presses, you have overhead presses, you have basically any time of pressing movement is going to use your triceps. But if you want to do tricep extensions, you're going to be limited to dumbbell extensions overhead. And maybe that bothers your shoulders. Maybe you don't have that option. Maybe you want to do press downs and that doesn't bother your shoulders. That's going to require a machine. It's going to require at least a pulley system to redirect the resistance from that direction to that direction. The resistance is always going to be moving up because that's the only direction the weight can go, but you can't press down and make a weight go up without the pulley system or a machine that does it. So there's nothing wrong with machines. They may not be the best option for you. They may not be the most cost effective. Your gym might not have the one you want to use and you have to find a workaround, which free weights have never failed anyone. I'm not trying to imply that. Free weights have done tremendous good and provided outstanding results for centuries. But just because it's the way it's always been done doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that it's the only way to do things. There are absolutely great machines. Unfortunately, there are terrible machines too. So you kind of have to pick and choose the ones that you think are best for you. But for you to believe that they have no use is definitely not true. They absolutely have their use because they allow you to redirect the resistance so that it's in direct opposition to the movement that the muscle you're training is made to move the limbs. Muscles move bones. If you want to directly train against your chest muscles, the bench press isn't the best exercise. Does it work the chest? Yes. Is that the prime function of the pectoral muscles? No. They're a fan-shaped muscle because they work to bring the arm down and in front of the body. So in that case, a cable crossover is actually a more direct chest movement insofar as providing resistance to the chest muscles. Will it work better than the bench press? Not necessarily, again, because you can build up to a pretty damn heavy bench press and put in a lot more work in that. And as I talked yesterday on arm training, you don't necessarily need to do isolation movements where you're going to risk possible tendonitis or other problems with that muscle group. But after you've done your bench pressing, if you want to throw in some pec deck or some dumbbell flies, again, free weights can still get the job done. Or if you want to put in some cable crossover so that you can get that direct chest resistance, it's not going to hurt you. Unless you don't like the exercise or you try to go too heavy too soon. Again, machines have their pluses and their minuses, and so do free weights. They don't typically have too many minuses, but there may be a better option from a machine that you have access to in order to get the results you want. That's a decision you're going to have to make on your own. I have no machines to sell you. Whichever way you go is up to you. I just don't like hearing people say that they're completely useless when they're absolutely not.